Henshaw here again, your friendly local constitutional counselor from California. And this video, I'm going to talk about uh, what I want to do and need to do, in order to get my work out to the public. And you'll learn I have a divinely granted a cappella expert witness command of 230 years of the Constitution, history, and laws of the United States. I don't know how I got picked for that, but that's a plain fact. And we can do a lot with that, and get out there and literally make changes, in the way business gets done, and maybe some bigger changes in the way the government operates. As you know, most of it today operates out of my former hometown of Washington, D.C., where it should be relegated to at least sovereign independent states, and or better yet, at the local level, particularly county level, and with education issues front and center. That makes such a big difference. And by the way, with relegating it to the states and local, much less expensive, much more effective, and you get a real chance to be involved in how government handles problems, especially the education of your children. That's how good this is and how good it was back in the day when we had this government in effect. And it only lasted maybe about 100 years or so, and they started in with the war between the states and Reconstruction, all of it BS. And they get these damn war amendments, the 14th and 15th, and you'll learn that not only they don't exist, they never did. That's wow. But these New York banks just don't have any limits as to what they'll do to gain total control over this nation and republic. So that said, I'm good enough, and you can see I'm doing it now. Another video I do, acapella, no notes, no nothing. And I can do that with videos on just about any subject with the Constitution. And I'll be willing to take on any and all state bar association attorneys, backroad bastards, you name it, and do it a cappella and let them struggle because they don't have a clue, because they weren't taught in school either, and I don't think law schools have been teaching anything like I know for the last 80 or 90 years. I think back in the day when O'Connor and Rehnquist were in law school together in the 40s, some of this may have been in there, but it's not now. And it leads me to wonder, by the way, how Clarence Thomas and Alito know what they know. Thomas, by the way, a quickie here, because yes, indeed, I'm a white supremacist. I don't hide that at all. And yet, Clarence Thomas is in my top 10 justices of all time on the Supreme Court out of 117 of them. And so is Alito. And Kavanaugh and Gorsuch will probably get there, four of them at the same time. And if we get younger conservative appointees by Trump in the upcoming term of the Supreme Court on October 5th, and I wish that would have happened the last term, now they're going to be instructed to start doing their job, which that court knows it hasn't done for almost 100 years. And when you and I get there, and you'll learn all about the correct way to do that, we have a right to be there and a right to be heard. And these justices damn well know it. Not only Palestine with all those corporate BS and this, that, and the other. And in fact, I'm going to make a proposal to create a corporate AI Supreme Court for all these corporate entities who don't have any business anywhere near a judicial court like we do. Not to mention trial by jury, according to the course of the common law, with juries where we have qualified jurors who can rule on the facts and the laws. This is how good it is. So I'm going to need some help, no question about it. Nothing major. I'm not one of them looking for $1 billion in funds or anything like that. But if we work together, we can do this and we can make changes like you won't believe. But I've been blessed with the ability to do it. And that's what I want to do and finish my job before I go out of here. And by the way, if you don't know, I just turned 77 earlier this month. And yet I hardly feel like 55. And not only that, I've had a recent, astounding, proven medical miracle, where I was all but down for the count back in August with urinary issues and this, that, and the other. And they just all vanished out of thin air. And we'll talk more about that on another video. But I feel as good as I did 20 years ago, maybe a little earlier than that. And among other reasons, by the way, that's because I haven't abused my body. And I've led a good life. And I made a decision a long time ago for different reasons earlier on But when I realized the importance of my work, and I said, well, if I can't put a family first, I can't have one. And I'm the last of the line. They're going to love that in Washington, D.C. That's the right decision. And I'm glad I made it because it allows me to do what it is I do. And that's what's going to make the difference here. And it's why I was put here. Another interesting story you'll learn more about is that I know I was put here on March the 4th, 1857. Don't ask, but I'm mid 19th century, not mid 20th. And oddly enough, I'm embarrassed to say I never talked to my mom about this when I was growing up and a young kid, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. She sent me during the summers to stay with her family in Virginia and West Bygosh, Virginia. And that had to have been very hard. And I'm embarrassed I never asked her about that. But she knew because Dad was an alcoholic. And he was a good person, mind you, but she didn't want me around that all summer. And I'm right down there, and I learned. And back in the 50s, it was a lot like it was in the 1850s. And a lot of that rubbed off. If I'd gotten any education in school later on, my life would have changed much earlier than it did. And even then, I knew because my mom and I and her dad, my grandfather, went to the Gettysburg battlefield, the 100th anniversary back in July of 1863. And I instinctively knew without knowing how important that was. And my grandfather cried. That's the only time I ever saw him do that because he knew if we win that battle, we win the war between the states. That simple. Well, I didn't know. And, instinctively I got it, but I don't understand like what I do today. And I did eventually end up, by the way, in Philadelphia. And I just missed it by a year. My other grandmother on my dad's side, and my mom and her were never close. It's a long story, but she was a school teacher back in the 1920s, 100 years ago, when we had sixth grades, in one room in the schoolhouse. And she was a very good teacher. And she could see how smart I was. And when my older brother and sister were 13, they got a trip to Constitution Hall in Philadelphia. She passed away when I was 12, wouldn't you know? So I never got the trip. Had that happened at the age of 13, have you seen a movie called National Treasure? That's what would have happened. I would have been woke up a whole hell of a lot earlier, but it never did. And by the way, I did eventually get there. But had that happened at age 13, wow. And it just wasn't meant to be. But I want to teach you so you have the same feelings I do, and we can get out there, and get a lot of good work done, make some big changes in the system. And that's the primary goal for me. And that's why we're going to also end up getting a lot of big bucks with settlement demands for what we can prove are multiple acts of treason to the Constitution. And you'll learn that's not me saying it, that's the U.S. Supreme Court. And I can quote that a cappella too, verbatim, without any notes. And that's why we're going to beat them on the other side because they have nowhere to go now. With Trump appointing new justices, and hopefully this term should have been the last term, but he has to do it now because if they lose the quote unquote election in 2026 and lose control of the Senate, now he can't appoint anybody. With three younger ones on there, that court's good for the next 15 or 20 years. And that's exactly what we want to see happen. They're going to have our backs for the first time in like 100 years. And that's bargaining leverage. The other side can't go there because it isn't just one case, one foreclosure, one eviction, you name it. Because if it's on the record, especially from the U.S. Supreme Court, that puts all these bastards out of business. They're done. Ain't. See you later. That's how good it is. So send me an email, humancourt@gmail.com, and we can discuss, how to work together. You're going to absolutely love it. And I don't need, I'm not talking about a hell of a lot of money here. So it's not a big deal with that. But it would be very useful to have some for now. We'll work all that out. I mean, it's going to be so great. You can't believe the opportunity that we have here. First time in 150 years we've had a window like this. So send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com. And remember to subscribe, like the videos, get the word out, tell your friends. The sooner we start invoking our rights, the quicker we get our lawful government back. And that's the best thing that could possibly happen. So remember to subscribe, like the videos, tell your friends, get the word out. The sooner we take action, the quicker we win the battle. Thank you.